Hey guys, how you doing today? Really beautiful day out. It's such a tease, right? I got my doggy out for a little walk. He's right there, my little precious guy, isn't he just? He's a little tuckered. I thought I'd take a moment and just do a nice little recording right now. Oh, what have I got in there? Oh, gross, gross. uh, um, I don't really know what to talk about today, Like it feels like the news has kind of stagnated. Everything's sort of on a bit of a simmer. Here in Ontario, the case numbers are kind of holding steady. New cases are either just below 400 or just over 400, and they seem to kind of be going on that kind of steady line before we hit kind of a second wave, which I think is inevitable at this point. But we all know that. Um, Honestly, I think like the Beaverton had a really great article where it said student who applied for the CESB blows it all on one PDF textbook, and I had a good chuckle about that because I was very the people over at the Beaverton are incredibly insightful. Absolutely, they've got the finger on the pulse of what's going on in the public, and they make some really intelligent and clever observations, and make some really fun and interesting connections. And their ability to funnel it and break it down and make it sound like it is an actual headline is very skillfully done. So I love the Beaverton, and every time they come out with anything, I think it's really clever. But it gets me thinking, right? Like the structure of our current economy. Here, I'll start it this way. There's people have a fascination with money. That money is this object that people are focusing on, and yeah, I think I'll talk about this. That like money and what it is and how it operates and how it works, right? People have this real like the whole how are you going to pay for that group of people get really trapped in this kind of way of thinking, and how are you going to pay for that, and how where are you going to find the money, and it reveals kind of a backwards way of thinking, actually, because money itself is not an object, right? And this sort of mad pursuit for money, right, really reveals kind of a structural flaw in how we've built our society, and that there's this mad pursuit for to get this fictitious non-thing that we invented. It would be like if, well, and it is like this. It's like we're sacrificing our lives in order to get tiny scraps of paper, and these tiny scraps of paper are invented. Because they're digital now. They literally no longer exist. It's all just digitized. Exists on computer screens in like almost an alternate reality. Like it's literally, and it's literally fictitious. Like it's not something that and that's like not hyperbolic or anything. Like we create it from nothing. We used to attach its value to coinage or like a metal of some kind in order to kind of limit how much money there actually was, and especially in order to exclude other types of people from our economies, right? That if you had a gold coin with the queen stamped on it, right, that was the queen's coinage, and if you weren't operating within the economy of the queen, then you wouldn't accept that type of currency, right? But as time has gone forward, and this started happening in the 1900s, where we moved away from what's called the gold standard, right? That idea of there's actually like a metal that has a value to our currency. And we simply just started creating a fiat currency. We just started creating a currency that has no basis. It literally is just exists in our imagination. And its value is really, there are several things that can influence the value of this currency, this imagined fictitious thing. One of them is military might, honestly. Like, if you've got the strongest military and you say my currency is valuable, everyone's going to go, yes, indeed it is. because because you have the authority and the power to, well, not the authority, but you have the power to be able to walk over and just enforce your will and say this has value. And so it does. But interestingly, outside of that idea, if a currency has value simply because the people using it say it does. That's what's fascinating about money, is that if we all just started using bottle caps and just started exchanging bottle caps, and said that's how we do our exchanges and that's how we exchange currency amongst one another, everyone would, and if everybody agreed to that, it would work. Because money ultimately is just a technology, like writing. And the purpose of the technology is to keep track of a culture's decisions. And that's it. If you have money, the assumption built into the society is that, well, you must have done something of value in order to get that money. And so I'll exchange my productivity or my other object or whatever for that money or for that currency. And we accept that as sort of a common usage, but the money itself it exists only as like a trace, as a way to say, as a way to keep track of ourselves. Like, can you imagine if the society didn't have money and we were just sort of exchanging goods and services, right? Through however system you'd like, barter or whatever. There would be no way to kind of keep track of any decisions that get made in the society. And so we can, as a people, just decide to do things, right? And to decide that certain things are valuable to us, and so we just want them to occur. And the money will just sort of flow in that direction, right? And likely, and this is the reason why people don't like the idea of like wealth redistribution, or they stand against it, is because when you make those decisions, money will flow away from systems that no longer work. And so in our current situation, right, if you have a billionaire in your society, like billionaires are worthless. Like they offer nothing to your society. It's literally, we've just said to an individual, okay, you make the decisions about where our productivity goes and what kind of money and monetary ideas we can have, right? And we've based it on a free market. So, okay, you've managed to play the game of Monopoly, which is what it is, the best. And so but nobody actually says, okay, well, what happens after you're done a game of Monopoly? What happens when everybody accrues, when one person manages to get all that money? What happens? Well, in the game of Monopoly, you just put everything back in the box and it's over, right? And then you just kind of restart it if you want to continue playing it. So you have to redistribute the wealth in order to play another game of Monopoly, right? But in this society, right, we aren't just going to put everything back in a box and like redo it, right? And so what's going to happen is that as we come up with ideas, capital flow, like the money that has been accrued under these worthless billionaires who are just not interested in improving the society, is going to flow away from them, and it's going to flow into alternative ideas, right? Like, other places have offered their societies free education. And the thing is that if you have free education, right, and you're not attaching it to the profits of a billionaire, well, then the billionaire is going to lose money, right? That's just naturally how it's going to occur. It's just going to flow away from the billionaire, and it's going to flow into the populace, right? It's going to flow towards teachers. It's going to flow towards educators. It's going to flow towards students. And it's going to be an investment in the society's future. You're going to end up with a more educated populace. You're going to end up with people who know more about what's going on and who understand the systems that they live in, right? And that's not going to benefit. That's not going to. I know Milo has opinions about this. Yes, he does. That's okay, buddy. It's just birds. It's just birds. Don't you think? Huh? Don't you think, buddy? He gets so upset because there's birds, right? He's such a cute little guy. Little Milo break. What the heck? Oh yeah, I know, buddy. I know, buddy. Can you sit? Can you sit? You're so precious. Good boy, buddy. Thanks. And so the reason why, and it gets really dumb really fast, right? Because billionaires will then, like, pay media institutions and put up billboards, and they'll spend huge amounts of money in order to convince the populace that something like free education, or any idea, like the basic income, anything, is a bad idea, right? And they're happy to open up the flows of money to people who are arguing that billionaires should keep their money, right? Because billionaires see that as an investment when it's completely worthless. Like, it's completely worthless activity. Anytime anybody stands up and says, we should keep a billionaire rich, what they're fundamentally saying is we should just keep giving power to a failed, dead institution that needs to go away. They might as well be arguing in favor of the monarchy. You know, they might as well be arguing that a king should exist in the society, right? Because billionaires are fundamentally worthless. What ultimately happens with a billionaire is that they just hire someone else to do all the business for them. They have accountants who they have. Like, if you have $1 billion, you can have thousands of people just running all your businesses and doing all your stuff. And the only decision you ever need to make is, well, is the money going up? And if not, then I'm just going to get somebody who's going to make the money go up. And you can just laze around and do what you want. This is why billionaires work so hard to throw back the stuff that they are guilty of, right? No one's lazier than a billionaire. No one is lazier than a billionaire, right? We do all the work, they get all the benefits. That's how the system is structured, and it's very stupid and insipid. And we could make it stop. Like, it would be easy. We know how to do it. And even if we pretended like we didn't know how to do it, there's so many examples that exist in the world of places that have free education, that have systems that are better than the systems we have. So we could literally just take those examples and do them. Exactly how we did with the universal healthcare system, right? And we could just decide. That's the thing. We can just decide. And the flow of... And the money will just kind of flow in that direction and follow it once we make the decision. Because once you make the decision to actually do something, right? Well, then the money... I mean, then there's the money people, and that's their job, right? Is to understand how the money goes and all that kind of stuff. But that's not that much different than commissioning a book to be written, and then a writer does it, you know, like, or and uses that technology in order to do it. But you have to decide to do something before you do it. And so, and I think this is actually important because we're in a position now where we need to start actually restructuring our society, and we have to decide how we want to restructure our society. And like, when you look to me, we're in the same position as like the Great Depression, right? We're at the start of a new Great Depression. And I think the thing that people don't really get or remember, the Great Depression lasted like 10 years, right? 10 plus. And they got out of it. And they got out of it because they started to invest in their society. They started to make decisions on how to better their society and better how everything went. And they started to distribute capital flow back into the society. And then they fought a war. And so they funneled productivity into the hands of the populace by sending them off to die for it, right? And that And that became the method of their distribution, that instead of just giving them the capital they needed in order to get what they wanted, like food and shelter and education, they funneled them through a war machine in order to do it. And all I'm suggesting is that we just forego the war machine, right? We just say, like, oh, okay, like, instead of sending people off to die in a war, we'll just cut that out, and just erect something like the GI Bill, right? Just say, like, oh, you want an education? Okay, here you go, right? You don't have to go fight a war and die for it, which is part of how they got out of the Great Depression. And I mean, amongst other things, they built a social security system. They built employment insurance, these sorts of things. And we could continue that trend. But the big failing, I think the number one thing that they did wrong at the end of the New Deal, and there's a whole history, like Henry Wallace totally gets robbed of continuing this tradition, who was the vice president of FDR. And in any case, the failing that they did is that they didn't eradicate the capitalists. That the capitalists were, while they were diminished in their wealth and in their power, the capitalists maintained their position, and all of the positions were maintained. So that, sure, I, as a capitalist, have a pretty high tax rate. Like at the inception of the New Deal, right, the highest level of taxation was like high 80s or 90s, right? Like, so if you made over $1 million, right, all the money outside of that was taxed at like 80%. It was a huge level, which I think, yeah, we could go back to for sure. And I think we should go back to, because no one person deserves to be a billionaire, like, under any circumstances. No one person deserves to earn the wealth of the nation that the nation is working for, right? Like, it's so stupid to even think about the idea that someone like Jeff Bezos is earning his wealth. It's so dumb. Like, I really do think you have to be dumb to believe that, and lots of people are dumb, and so lots of people believe that. But lots of people believe, like, the flat earth theory too, right? So, oh, I know, buddy, birds. I know, buddy. And so but they didn't, so at the end of the New Deal, and FDR said it, right? He saved capitalism, which means he maintained the position of powerful people. And so even though they received a high tax rate, even though that they were getting hit at high levels of taxation, the money still flowed through them. They still got to be, they still got to boss people around and make decisions on behalf of themselves. And they still got to control the means of production. That's a big one. They still were the people who were linked closely with the decision-making apparatus of the nation. That you couldn't, the only thing that was preventing them from kind of entering the period that we're living in right now is political force. The political force of the socialists and the communists and the unions, right? All of which has been well attacked now. And so we can very easily make the same decisions, right? And what we lack is organized labor. That's really what we lack. And I've been saying it the whole time, right? Like, we could just all take to the streets, make our demands, and one of the big demands that I think that we should do if we want to continue living in a civil society, or if we want to build a civil society, I should say, is we should demand that the shareholder class and the working class merge. Which is to say that right now we have shareholders who get all the money and workers who do all the work. And the people who do the work should be the ones who hold the shares. And it should just be equal, in my view. Like, we call grocers, before this pandemic, grocers were like, you're a dime a dozen, we could just get rid of you. During this pandemic, now they're essential workers. Well, if they're so essential, then they should own the business, right? They should have the same amount of shares as, like, a grocer should have the same amount of shares as a manager. And those two positions should be thought of as equivalent. And I think that this is something that we need to continue towards, and something that we need to genuinely think about. That maintaining a system of class and maintaining this kind of class war, where there's a shareholder class and a working class, is always going to lead us to eternal conflict. And what we really need to be focusing on is a merger of those two classes. Like Karl Marx was like, we need to seize the means of production through violent coup and all this kind of stuff. And I sort of look at that and I go, oh, okay, that's one way to think about it. Or we could just peacefully agree that the people who do the work should own the enterprises. And we live in a democracy, and we can make that decision. And it is as simple as making decisions like, if you are a worker, you get shares, right? You get the same amount of shares as a shareholder. And I don't think that that's something that's like they're doing that in Germany, for goodness sakes. Like, I don't think that's particularly radical. We could do something like if a private owner seeks to sell his business, as private owners eventually do, then the workers should have the first right of refusal, which is that the workers can buy the business and then set something up like a worker co-op. And so in that case, in this way, we're making decisions in the society where it's not so extreme as going in and seizing people's property and using weapons and guns and all of this. But instead, we're just making decisions. We're making political decisions to say, hey, this is how we want to structure our society. That businesses should be owned by the people who work in them. They should be the ones who make the decisions about what goes on. Because right now, we're all working in private tyrannies. And it's sort of untenable. It's something that I don't want to continue living in. But we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. Anyway, I think that's the end of me. Run out of time. Hope you guys are having a good time. I hope you're loving each other. And yeah, keep fighting the good fight. Like, share, subscribe, the classic kind of stuff, right? Make me famous. Just leave a comment. Say hi. I really like it when people say hi. All right. Have fun out there, guys.